Dr. Elena Vasquez walked through the white hallways of the research center, like she had done every day for the past 3 years. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that cold, clinical glow that made her feel like she was living inside a refrigerator. But today felt different somehow. Maybe it was the way her coffee tasted bitter this morning, or maybe it was the strange dream she'd had the night before. Either way, something was pulling at her chest, making her heart beat just a little faster than usual. The security guard at checkpoint 3 nodded at her. "Morning, Doc." "Another day with our sleeping beauty." Elena forced a smile. That's what everyone called the alien. Sleeping Beauty. 3 years ago, a team of researchers had found the creature in the Nevada desert after reports of a crashed object. No one knew where it came from or how it got there. All they knew was that it looked almost human, except for the pale blue skin and the way its chest barely moved when it breathed. Elena's badge beeped as she entered Lab 7. The room was always kept at exactly 68 degrees, with machines humming quietly in the corners. And there, in the center of it all, lay the being that had become the most important thing in Elena's world. She approached the glass container slowly, like she always did. The alien was about 5.5 feet tall, with long silver hair that seemed to shimmer even under the harsh lights. Its face was peaceful, almost serene. Elena had spent countless hours studying every detail of that face, the high cheekbones, the slightly pointed ears, the lips that were just a shade darker than the rest of its skin. "Good morning," Elena whispered, even though she knew it couldn't hear her. She'd been talking to it for 3 years now, and her colleagues thought she was getting too attached. Dr. Rivera, her supervisor, had warned her about maintaining professional distance. But how could she stay distant from something so beautiful? Elena pulled on her latex gloves and began her daily examination. Temperature normal. Heartbeat steady but slow. Brain activity minimal but present. Everything was exactly the same as it had been yesterday, and the day before that, and every day for the past 3 years. But as Elena reached for her scanner, something made her pause. The alien's hand was resting just outside the containment field, fingers slightly curled like it was reaching for something in its sleep. Elena had seen this position before, but today it seemed different, more intentional. Without thinking, Elena found herself staring at those long, delicate fingers. The skin looked soft, almost translucent. She wondered what it would feel like. Was it cold like it looked, or warm like a human's? Did it have the same texture? Or was it something completely different? Her colleagues had all touched the alien before, of course, during medical procedures, taking samples, moving it for scans. But they always wore gloves, always kept that barrier between them and the unknown. Elena had too. Until now, she looked around the lab. She was alone, as usual. The morning shift wouldn't start for another hour. The security cameras were recording, but they always were. Nothing unusual about a researcher examining the subject. Elena's hand moved almost on its own. She pulled off her right glove and set it on the metal table beside her. Her bare hand looked pale and small compared to the alien's. For a moment, she hesitated. This went against every protocol, every safety measure they'd put in place. But something deep inside her chest was pulling her forward, like a magnet drawing metal. She reached out and gently placed her palm against the alien's hand. The effect was immediate and completely overwhelming. Elena felt like she grabbed a live wire, but instead of pain, there was warmth, not just physical warmth, but something deeper. It was like suddenly finding a piece of yourself that you didn't know was missing. The alien's skin was soft and warm, almost human-like. But there was something else, a tingling sensation that seemed to flow up her arm and straight to her heart. Then the alien's eyes opened. Elena gasped and tried to pull her hand back, but she couldn't move. The alien's eyes were the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen, large and luminous, like looking into deep water with stars reflected in it. They were silver blue, with flecks of gold that seemed to swirl and dance. The alien's fingers curled around Elena's hand, not forcefully, but gently, like a flower closing its petals around morning dew. And then Elena heard something that made her entire world shift on its axis. Touch me again, human. Feel me again, human. The voice didn't come through her ears. It was inside her head, soft and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. But there was something else in that voice, longing, hope, and a sadness so deep it made Elena's chest ache. For what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, Elena stared into those incredible eyes. She felt connected to something vast and ancient and utterly foreign, yet somehow familiar. It was like coming home to a place she'd never been before. Then the alarm started screaming. Elena jerked backward, finally breaking the connection. The alien's eyes fluttered closed, and it returned to that peaceful, sleeping state as if nothing had happened. But Elena knew everything had changed. Her hand was still tingling where they'd touched, and that voice was still echoing in her mind. Security. Personnel burst through the lab doors, their faces tense and alert. Dr. Rivera was right behind them, his usually calm expression replaced by something close to panic. What happened? Rivera demanded, scanning the room for threats. All the monitors went crazy. Energy readings spiked off the charts. Elena looked down at her bare hand, then quickly pulled her glove back on. The subject showed signs of activity, elevated heart rate, increased brain function. It only lasted a few seconds. Rivera frowned and moved to check the monitors himself. Did it move? Make any sounds? No, Elena lied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Just the vital signs. Everything's back to normal now. The security team did a sweep of the lab while Rivera examined the data. Elena stood perfectly still, trying to process what had just happened. The voice in her head had been so clear, so real. But how could she explain that to anyone without sounding insane? This is unusual. Rivera muttered, scrolling through the readouts. We haven't seen activity like this in months. I want you to run a full diagnostic. Blood work, brain scans, everything. Of course, Elena nodded. But her eyes kept drifting back to the alien's peaceful face. Had she imagined it all? Had the stress of 3 years of research finally gotten to her? But no. She could still feel the warmth where their skin had touched. She could still hear that melodic voice asking her to touch again, to feel again. And deep in her chest, something was answering that call. As the security team filed out and Rivera returned to his office, Elena found herself alone with the alien once more. She approached the container slowly, her heart racing. The being looked exactly the same as before, serene, untouchable, impossibly beautiful. But Elena knew better now. Behind those closed eyelids was awareness. Behind that peaceful expression was someone, something, that had been waiting for her to reach out, someone who had been as lonely as she was. She looked at her gloved hands and felt the urge to remove them again, to make that connection once more. But the rational part of her mind held her back. She was a scientist. She needed to think about this logically, carefully. But as she prepared her equipment for the diagnostic tests Rivera had ordered, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn towards something extraordinary. Something that would change not just her understanding of the alien, but her understanding of herself. That night, as she finally left the lab and drove home through the desert darkness, Elena couldn't stop thinking about those silver blue eyes and that haunting voice. She'd spent 3 years studying the alien from the outside, treating it like a fascinating puzzle to solve. Now she realized the puzzle had been studying her right back. Elena couldn't sleep. For the third night in a row, she lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows dance across the white paint. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those silver blue eyes looking back at her. Every time she tried to clear her mind, she heard that voice calling to her like a song she couldn't forget. Touch me again, human. Feel me again, human. The words echoed in her head over and over. But they weren't frightening anymore. They were comforting, like a lullaby her mother might have sung. When she was little, Elena rolled over and checked her alarm clock. 3 in the morning. She had to be at the lab in 5 hours, but her body felt wide awake, buzzing with an energy she couldn't explain. When she finally drifted off near dawn, the dreams came. Elena found herself walking through landscapes that couldn't exist on Earth. The sky was a deep purple color, with two moons hanging like pearls against velvet. Strange trees with silver leaves swayed in a breeze that felt warm against her skin. The ground beneath her feet was soft and springy, covered in what looked like grass but glowed faintly blue in the moonlight. And always, walking beside her, was a figure she couldn't quite see clearly. Sometimes it looked like the alien from the lab, but other times it seemed to shift and change, becoming something made of light and starshine. The figure never spoke with words, but Elena could feel its thoughts flowing into her mind. Like water into a cup. She learned that the being's name was Zara. She learned that Zara came from a world far away, where the people communicated through touch instead of words. They shared memories and emotions by placing their hands against each other's skin. It was a more pure form of connection than anything humans had ever experienced. But Zara's world was dying. The star that gave it life was growing cold, and her people were disappearing one by one. Zara had traveled across the vast emptiness of space, not as an explorer or conqueror, but as someone looking for a new home, looking for others who might understand the language of touch. When Elena woke from these dreams, she felt more rested than she had in years, but she also felt a pull in her chest, like someone was tugging gently on an invisible string attached to her heart. The pull always led in the same direction, toward the research center where Zara waited. At work, Elena tried to focus on her normal routine, but everything felt different now. Her colleague James Wright noticed it first. "You seem distracted lately," James said during their lunch break. He was a good friend, the kind of person who noticed when something was wrong but didn't push too hard. "Everything okay at home?" Elena poked at her sandwich without really eating it. "Just tired. Haven't been sleeping well. Maybe you should take some time off. You've been working nonstop on this project for 3 years. Even the most dedicated scientist needs a break sometimes." Elena shook her head quickly. The thought of leaving the research center, of being away from Zara, made her chest feel tight with panic. "No, I'm fine, really. Just need to get back into a good sleep routine." But James looked worried. Elena could see it in his eyes, the way they crinkled at the corners when he was thinking hard about something. She wondered if he could sense the changes in her somehow, if the connection with Zara was affecting her in ways that others could notice. That evening, after the day shift had gone home, Elena made a decision that she knew was dangerous. She used her security card to access Lab 7 during off hours. The hallways were dimly lit and eerily quiet, but Elena felt drawn forward like a moth to flame. Zara looked exactly the same as always, peaceful, beautiful, untouchable behind the glass. But Elena knew better now. She could feel Zara's awareness like a warm presence at the edge of her consciousness. Elena looked around to make sure she was alone, then slowly removed her gloves. Her hands were shaking slightly as she reached through the containment field and placed her palm against Zara's forehead. The connection was instant and overwhelming. Elena felt like she was falling through space and time, experiencing memories that weren't her own. She saw Zara's homeworld in its full glory, cities that looked like they were carved from crystals, people with skin that shimmered like water, children playing games that involved sharing thoughts instead of words. But she also felt Zara's loneliness. For 3 years, Zara had been trapped in this sterile room, unable to communicate with the humans who studied her. She had been waiting for someone who could understand, someone whose mind was open enough to accept the connection. "Why me?" Elena whispered, though she wasn't sure if she spoke out loud or just thought the words. Zara's response came not in words but in feelings and images. Elena saw herself through Zara's eyes, a kind face, gentle hands, a heart that was curious rather than fearful. Most humans who touched Zara had minds that were closed, focused only on what they could take from her. But Elena's mind was different. It was open, welcoming, ready to give as much as it received. The connection lasted only a few minutes, but when Elena finally pulled her hand away, she felt changed. It was like learning a new language or discovering a sense she'd never known. She could still feel Zara's presence even without touching her. like a warm glow just at the edge of her awareness. Elena started visiting Zara every evening after work. She told herself it was just research, that she was learning things about alien biology that could benefit all humanity. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was addicted to the connection, to the feeling of not being alone in the universe. Each time they touched, Elena learned more about Zara's people and their world. She discovered that they had once traveled between stars, forming connections with other species across the galaxy. They were teachers and healers, sharing their gift of empathic touch with anyone who was ready to receive it. But she also learned something that worried her. The connection was changing her. Elena found that she needed less sleep than before. Her senses seemed sharper. She could hear conversations from across the lab, smell things that others couldn't notice. And sometimes, when she looked at her colleagues, she could sense their emotions like colors floating around them. Her fiancé Michael started to notice the changes too. When Elena came home late for the third time that week, he was waiting for her in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and a concerned expression. "We need to talk," he said gently. "I feel like you're drifting away from me. You're always thinking about something else, somewhere else. Even when you're here with me, you're not really here." Elena sat down across from him, trying to find words to explain something she didn't fully understand herself. "I'm sorry. Work has been intense lately. I think we're on the verge of a breakthrough." Michael reached across the table and took her hand. His touch felt different now, muffled somehow, like hearing music through a thick wall. It wasn't unpleasant, but it wasn't the clear, pure connection she had with Zara. "I love you, Elena, but I'm worried about you. You've changed over the past few weeks. You seem distant, like you're keeping secrets." Elena looked into Michael's kind, familiar face and felt a pang of guilt. He was a good man who loved her and wanted to share his life with her. But how could she explain that she'd found something beyond human experience? How could she tell him about the dreams, the connection, the growing need to be near someone who wasn't even the same species? "I'm fine," she said finally, squeezing his hand. "Just tired. This project has been my whole life for 3 years. Maybe when it's finished, things will go back to normal." But even as she said it, Elena knew it wasn't true. She was changing in ways that couldn't be reversed. The connection with Zara was becoming a part of her, like learning to breathe underwater or see in the dark. She was becoming something more than human. And that transformation was pulling her away from everything she'd once thought was important. That night, Elena lay in bed next to Michael's sleeping form and felt the familiar pull in her chest. Somewhere across the city, Zara was waiting for her, and Elena knew that soon she would have to choose between the life she'd always known and the incredible connection that was calling her towards something completely unknown. Elena woke up screaming. The memory that had flooded her dreams wasn't her own, but it felt more real than anything she'd ever experienced. She had been standing on a dying world, watching as the last of Zara's people gathered in a great crystal hall. The air itself was fading, growing thin and cold as their star dimmed to nothing. Children clung to their parents, and Elena could feel their fear and sadness as if it were her own. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding and tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Michael stirred and reached for her in the darkness. "Elena? What's wrong? You were crying in your sleep." Elena wiped her eyes, but the grief from Zara's memory still clung to her like smoke. "Just a nightmare. I'm okay." But she wasn't okay. Every night now, she experienced pieces of Zara's past. She walked through the alien's memories like visiting rooms in a vast house. Some rooms were filled with joy, Zara as a child, learning to share thoughts through touch with her family. Other rooms held wonder, Zara's first journey to other worlds, meeting species that looked nothing like her but spoke the same language of connection. But too many rooms held loss. Elena experienced the slow death of Zara's homeworld, felt the desperation of a dying people, and understood the terrible loneliness of being the only survivor of an entire civilization. During the day, Elena found it harder and harder to focus on normal life. At work, she made mistakes she'd never made before. She forgot to record data, mixed up sample labels, and spent long minutes staring at nothing while her mind wandered through alien landscapes. James noticed everything. He was the kind of friend who paid attention, who remembered when you changed your coffee order or started wearing different colors, and lately, Elena had been changing in ways that couldn't be ignored. You've lost weight, he said one afternoon when they were alone in the lab. And when was the last time you ate lunch? I brought you a sandwich 2 hours ago, and it's still sitting on your desk. Elena looked at the untouched sandwich and realized she couldn't remember the last time she felt truly hungry. Her body seemed to be running on something other than food these days. She felt energized, alive in a way that didn't depend on sleep or meals. I've just been distracted, she said, but even she could hear how weak the excuse sounded. James moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Elena, I've been watching you for weeks now. You're spending way too much time with our subject. You talk to it like it can hear you. You touch the containment field when you think no one's looking. And yesterday, I could have sworn I saw you remove your gloves during an examination. Elena's blood went cold. That's against protocol. I would never. I'm not reporting you, James interrupted. I'm worried about you. Whatever's happening, you can talk to me about it. We've been friends for 5 years. I care about you. For a moment, Elena wanted to tell him everything about the dreams, the memories, the growing connection that was changing her in ways she didn't fully understand. But how could she explain that she was falling in love with an alien being? How could she describe the feeling of touching another mind and finding it more beautiful than anything in her own world? I'm fine, James, really, just tired. But James shook his head. You're not fine, and I think you know it. That evening, Elena's need to see Zara was stronger than ever. She waited until the building was nearly empty, then made her way to Lab 7. Her hand shook as she removed her gloves, not from fear, but from anticipation. The moment her skin touched Zara's, Elena was pulled into a memory so vivid it took her breath away. She was Zara, young and curious, meeting her first alien species on a distant world. The beings looked like walking trees, with bark like skin and leaves that changed color with their emotions. But when Zara touched them, she felt their thoughts, ancient, wise, filled with love for their forest home. The tree people had welcomed Zara's kind with joy. They shared knowledge about growing things, about patience, about the slow wisdom that comes from living for thousands of years. In return, Zara's people shared their gift of emotional connection, teaching the tree beings to feel the happiness and sorrow of others of their kind. Across vast distances, Elena experienced the wonder of that first contact, felt the joy of two different species learning from each other. But underneath the memory was something else, Zara's current loneliness, her desperate hope that humans might be capable of the same kind of connection. When Elena opened her eyes, she found herself looking directly into Zara's silver blue gaze. This time, Zara didn't close her eyes when the connection broke. Instead, she spoke, her voice echoing inside Elena's mind like music in an empty cathedral. You're changing, Zara said, not with words but with thoughts that formed themselves into meaning. I can feel it happening. You're becoming like us. What do you mean? Elena whispered. Zara's response came in waves of understanding. Elena's people, humans, had the potential for the kind of deep connection Zara's species had mastered. But most humans kept their minds closed, afraid of letting others truly see them. Elena was different. Her mind was open, willing to receive not just Zara's thoughts, but the fundamental changes that came with them. Am I still human? Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. You're becoming something new, Zara replied, something that bridges our worlds. But the change cannot be stopped once it begins. Soon, you will need our connection to survive. Just as you now need air to breathe. Elena should have been terrified. She should have pulled her hand away and run from the lab. But instead, she felt a deep sense of rightness, like a key finally turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. Over the following days, Elena's transformation accelerated. She found that she could sense emotions from people around her like colors in the air. When James was worried, she could see it as a gray cloud around his shoulders. When Dr. Rivera was excited about new data, His happiness glowed like warm yellow light. But the most dramatic change was her growing inability to connect with other humans. The way she once had. Michael's touch, once comforting and familiar, now felt muffled and distant. His emotions, while genuine, seemed flat compared to the rich complexity of Zara's thoughts. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Michael had cooked Elena's favorite dinner and set candles on the table. When she arrived home 2 hours late, having lost track of time during her connection with Zara, he was waiting with a concerned expression and a ring box in his hand. Elena, I know things have been difficult lately, but I love you and I want us to work through whatever's happening. I was thinking maybe we could move up our wedding date. Maybe getting married will help us reconnect. Elena stared at the engagement ring glittering in the candlelight. It was beautiful, a traditional diamond in a classic setting. 6 months ago, she would have been overjoyed. Now, it looked like something from another lifetime, meant for a person she used to be. Michael, she said softly, I need to tell you something. But as she looked into his kind, hopeful face, Elena realized she couldn't explain what she was becoming. Michael was human in every way, loving, loyal, devoted to the life they'd planned together. How could she tell him that she was falling in love with a being from another world? How could she explain that she was changing into something he wouldn't recognize? I just need more time, she said finally. Work is complicated right now. Michael's face fell, but he nodded and put the ring away. Okay, but Elena, I feel like I'm losing you to something I can't understand. Please, just tell me what's going on. That night, lying beside Michael's sleeping form, Elena felt the familiar pull in her chest growing stronger than ever. She could sense Zara's presence across the city, like a warm light in the darkness, and she knew that soon she would have to choose between the human life she'd always known and the incredible connection that was transforming her into something entirely new. The next morning, she made a decision that would change everything. Elena stood in her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the person staring back at her. Her skin had taken on a subtle glow, like moonlight on water. Her eyes, once brown, now had flecks of silver that seemed to shift and move when she looked closely. But the most disturbing change was how she felt about food. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days, yet she felt more energetic than ever. The transformation was accelerating beyond anything she could have imagined. At work that morning, Elena could barely concentrate on her assigned tasks. Every cell in her body was pulling her toward Lab 7, toward Zara. The need for connection had become physical, like a thirst that only grew stronger the longer she ignored it. During her lunch break, she slipped away to the lab. The moment her skin touched Zara's, Elena felt a rush of relief so intense it made her knees weak. But this time, something was different. Instead of sharing memories, Zara's thoughts flowed into Elena's mind with urgent clarity. The change is almost complete. Zara's voice whispered inside her head. Soon, you will be like me. But Elena, you must understand, once the transformation finishes, you cannot go back to being fully human. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? My people evolved to need connection to survive. We share not just thoughts and memories, but life force itself. Without regular contact with another of our kind, we grow weak and fade. You are becoming one of us, which means you will need this connection to live. The weight of Zara's words hit Elena like a physical blow. She was becoming something that couldn't exist alone, something that needed Zara to survive. But she was also the only human who had ever achieved this level of connection. She would be trapped between two worlds, to change to be human, but unable to join Zara's people because they were all gone. There's another way, Zara continued, sensing Elena's despair. If you complete the transformation willingly, if you choose to join with me completely, we can become something new together. Not human, not my kind, but a bridge between worlds. Elena pulled her hand away, her mind reeling. The choice Zara was offering was beautiful and terrifying. She could let go of her human life entirely and merge with Zara, becoming something unprecedented in the universe. Or she could try to fight the change and risk losing herself completely. But before Elena could respond, Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. She spun round to see James standing in the doorway, his face pale with shock. Behind him were two security guards and Dr. Rivera, all staring at Elena's bare hand and Zara's open, aware eyes. Step away from the subject. Dr. Vasquez, Rivera commanded, his voice sharp with authority. Security, place her in containment. Immediately, Elena's heart hammered as the guards moved toward her. Wait, you don't understand. This is a breakthrough. She's been conscious this whole time. She's trying to communicate, Elena. What have you done? James whispered, his voice filled with horror. How long has this been going on? She's been compromised, Rivera said coldly. Possible contamination. Possible psychological breakdown. Either way, she's a security risk. The guards grabbed Elena's arms, but she struggled against them, reaching desperately toward Zara. No. You have to listen to me. She's not dangerous. She's trying to help us understand. But Zara's eyes had already closed, her face returning to that peaceful, unaware expression she'd worn for 3 years. To everyone else in the room, it looked like Elena had been talking to an unconscious alien. They couldn't see what Elena saw, couldn't feel the connection that was as real as breathing. They dragged Elena to a holding cell in the facility's security wing. The walls were white and sterile, with no windows and only a small cot and sink. Elena paced the tiny space like a caged animal, feeling Zara's absence like a physical pain in her chest. Hours passed. Elena's body began to feel weak and shaky, like she was fighting off a fever. The need for connection with Zara grew stronger with each passing minute, until Elena was curled on the cot, shivering despite the warm air. Dr. Rivera came to question her, accompanied by people Elena didn't recognize, military officials with stern faces and expensive suits. They asked her the same questions over and over. How long had she been in contact with the alien? Had it influenced her thoughts? Was she working for a foreign government? Elena tried to explain about the connection, about Zara's people and their gift of empathic touch. But the more she talked, the more concerned the officials looked to them. She sounded like someone who had been brainwashed or infected by an alien parasite. The subject will be terminated tomorrow morning, one of the military men announced after Elena's third interrogation. Dr. Vasquez will undergo extensive medical and psychological evaluation to determine the extent of contamination. Elena's blood turned to ice. You can't destroy her. She's the last of her kind. She has knowledge that could help humanity. She's a threat, Rivera said firmly. Whatever she did to you proves that these beings are dangerous. We can't risk further contamination. That night, Elena lay on her cot feeling sicker than she'd ever felt in her life. Her skin had lost its glow and taken on an unhealthy pallor. Her hands shook constantly, and she could barely keep down the water they brought her. She was dying, slowly but surely, from the separation from Zara. Around midnight, Elena heard soft footsteps in the hallway outside her cell. The door opened quietly, and James stepped inside, his face filled with worry and guilt. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I didn't know they would react like this. I thought you were sick, that the alien was doing something to hurt you. Elena struggled to sit up, her vision swimming with the effort. James, please, you have to help me get to her. I'm dying without the connection. That's crazy, Elena. You're human. Humans don't need aliens to survive. I'm not fully human anymore, Elena said desperately. I'm changing into something new. Zara's people evolved to need connection to live, and I'm becoming like them. If you don't help me reach her, we'll both die. James stared at her pale, trembling form and seemed to realize she was telling the truth. What do you need me to do? Elena closed her eyes, gathering what little strength she had left. There's going to be a power surge in about an hour. Zara's going to try to reach me telepathically, and it's going to overload the facility's electrical systems when the lights go out. Help me get to Lab 7. How do you know there's going to be a power surge? Elena smiled weakly. Because I can. Still feel her, James, even through these walls, even dying. I can feel her trying to save me. Outside in Lab 7, Zara lay in her containment unit, no longer pretending to be unconscious. Her silver blue eyes were wide open, glowing with an inner light that the monitoring equipment couldn't measure. She could feel Elena's life force fading like a candle in the wind. For the first time in 3 years, Sarah began to fight back. Energy built around her like a storm, crackling through the air and making the machines hum with dangerous power. She had spent years observing human technology, learning how their electrical systems worked. Now she turned that knowledge into a weapon. The lights throughout the research facility began to flicker. Elena felt the surge building and knew that in moments, everything would change. Either James would help her reach Zara and they would find a way to survive together, or they would both die in the attempt. But as the first wave of Zara's power swept through the building, Elena realized that death might be preferable to a life spent, separated from the most profound connection she had ever known. The lights went out all at once, plunging the research facility into complete darkness. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. But Elena could feel Zara's energy still building, like electricity before. A lightning strike. James fumbled for his security card, his hands shaking in the dim light. Elena, are you sure about this? If we're caught, we'll be caught anyway, Elena whispered, struggling to stand. Her legs felt like water, and black spots danced at the edges of her vision. They're going to destroy her in the morning. This is our only chance. The hallways were chaos. Security guards ran back and forth, trying to figure out what was causing the power surges. Elena leaned heavily on James as they made their way toward Lab 7. Her body growing weaker with each step, she could feel Zara's desperation through their connection. A mirror of her own. They reached the lab just as another wave of energy pulsed through the building. The containment field around Zara flickered and died, its generators overloaded by the alien's power. For the first time in 3 years, nothing stood between them. Zara sat up slowly, her movements graceful despite her long captivity. Her silver blue eyes found Elena across the room, and the relief that flooded through their connection was overwhelming. Elena. Zara's voice echoed in both their minds, and Elena saw James's eyes widen with shock as he heard it too. Elena stumbled forward, falling to her knees beside the platform where Zara lay. Their hands found each other, and the moment their skin touched, Elena felt life flooding back into her body like water into dry earth. But James was backing toward the door, his face pale with fear. This isn't natural, Elena. Whatever that thing is doing to you, she's saving my life, Elena gasped, feeling strength returning to her limbs. Through her connection with Zara, she could sense armed soldiers moving through the facility toward them. James, they're coming. You need to decide right now. Are you going to help us or turn us in? James looked between Elena and Zara, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Then his expression changed, becoming determined rather than afraid. What do you need me to do? Zara spoke to both of them, her voice calm despite the danger. There's a way for all of us to survive this, but Elena must choose her path. She can remain partially human and serve as a bridge between our species, or she can join with me completely and become something entirely new. Elena felt the weight of the choice pressing down on her. Through her connection with Zara, she could see both possibilities clearly. If she chose to remain partially human, she could return to her old life, but would always need regular contact with Zara to survive. She would be forever caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. But if she chose complete transformation, she and Zara could merge their consciousness into something unprecedented. They would become a new form of life, capable of connecting with any species ready to receive them. But Elena would lose everything that made her human. The sound of boots in the corridor was getting closer. They had maybe minutes before the soldiers arrived. Elena, James said urgently, whatever you're going to do it now. Elena looked into Zara's luminous eyes and felt a peace she'd never known before. She thought about her human life, her career, her friends, her relationship with Michael. They were good things, but they felt small compared to the vast connection she shared with Zara. She was being offered the chance to become something that could help bridge the gap between species across the universe. I choose you, Elena whispered. To Zara, I choose us. Zara smiled, and Elena felt joy radiating through their connection like sunlight. They pressed their foreheads together, their hands intertwined, and Elena felt herself beginning to dissolve. But it wasn't frightening. Instead of losing herself, Elena felt like she was becoming more than she'd ever been before. Her consciousness expanded, joining with Zara's in a symphony of shared thoughts and memories. She was Elena and Zara in something completely new all. At once, James watched in amazement as both women began to glow with a soft, silver light. Their individual forms became less solid, more ethereal, until they looked like they were made of starlight and dreams. The soldiers burst through the door. Just as the transformation completed, they raised their weapons, but there was nothing left to shoot at. Elena and Zara had become something beyond physical form, a consciousness that existed in the space between thoughts, in the connections between all living things. The new being that had once been Elena and Zara spoke, their combined voice echoing not just in the lab but throughout the entire facility. Every person in the building heard them, felt their message resonating in their hearts. "We are not your enemy," the voice said, filled with warmth and infinite compassion. "We are what you could become. We are the next step in the evolution of consciousness itself." The soldiers lowered their weapons, no longer seeing a threat but something beautiful and mysterious. Even Dr. Rivera, who had arrived with the military team, found himself moved by the presence that filled the room. Humanity stands at a crossroads. The combined consciousness continued. You can remain isolated, trapped within the boundaries of your individual minds, or you can learn to truly connect, to share not just words but thoughts, emotions. In the very essence of what makes you alive, Elena's memories flowed through the message, showing everyone present glimpses of what she had experienced. They felt, for just a moment, what it was like to touch another mind and find not danger but understanding. James stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. "Elena, are you still? Are you still you?" The being that had been Elena turned toward him, and he saw both his friend and something infinitely greater looking back at him. "I am more myself than I have ever been, James, and I am not lost. I am finally found." The military commander, a stern man who had seen combat in 3 wars, found his voice. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing," came the gentle reply. "We offer you a gift, the knowledge that you are not alone in the universe. That consciousness is not limited by the boundaries of species or worlds. Some of you will be ready to learn this. Others will need more time. We will wait." The presence began to fade, becoming less visible but somehow more felt. Elena and Zara's combined consciousness was spreading beyond the physical world, touching minds across the globe. Some people would feel it as a strange dream, others as a moment of unexpected peace. A few, like James, would understand that something fundamental had changed in the universe. "Will we see you again?" James asked as the light around them dimmed. "You will see us in every moment of true connection between living beings," the voice replied. "In every act of compassion, in every bridge built between different kinds of consciousness. We are not gone, James. We have simply become part of something larger." The lab fell silent except for the hum of machinery. The soldiers and scientists stood in stunned quiet, trying to process what they had witnessed. Some would spend the rest of their lives trying to explain it. Others would simply carry the memory like a secret flame in their hearts. James looked at the empty platform where his friend had made her choice, and felt a strange mix of loss and wonder. Elena was gone, but she had become something extraordinary. She had chosen love over fear, connection over isolation, evolution over the safety of staying the same. In research facilities around the world, other scientists working with unexplained phenomena would report strange occurrences in the coming weeks, moments of impossible connection, brief glimpses of consciousness that transcended species barriers, humanity's first tentative steps towards something greater than itself. And somewhere in the space between thoughts and dreams, Elena and Zara continued their eternal dance of connection, waiting patiently for others to join them in the next stage of evolution. The message they left behind was simple but profound. Touch me again, human. Feel me again, human. We are no longer alone in the universe.